All right, I'm going live with YouTube, and I forgot to sight in my camera so you guys can see anything. Um, there we go. Okay. So if Muriel, if you're there, somebody is there. Can you double check? I know right now my face is like blown. There you go. Can you double check? Someone tell me that the sound is on before I go live everywhere else, because I don't want to shut them down if it's not. I have too many issues with with sound and this being tricky. Yes, you can hear me. Okay, great. So I will then go ahead and add everybody else everywhere else, and then we will talk about this topic, which I'm super, super excited about today. So we're going to be talking about, I'm going to go live now and everywhere else. Thanks, guys, for the technical support. I appreciate it. I'm going to have to edit that part out. Anyway, we're going to talk about how to argue with a narcissist. Should be interesting. How many of us have been in these situations in which it's a miserable experience? We get into a conflict. They even make conflict up out of nowhere. You don't even have to have a real issue. All you have to do is just be breathing, I think, sometimes for a narcissistic person to want to fight with you. So today we're going to talk about what do you do when that happens? How do you handle sorry, that's bugging me. I don't know if it's bugging you, but how do you handle conflictual moments when narcissists go after you, when you get this funny word salad and they like turn it in from that into this into that, and you start out talking about who's picking the kids up, and next thing you know that you're talking about, they're arguing about your perspective of politics or something. They just move from topic to topic. Or the other really frustrating thing is you bring something up and they just shut down and walk out of the room. Or they say it's you. They end up making that you're the one having a problem because you have a problem. So today we're going to be talking about this frustration and how to handle it. We're going to also be addressing the gray rock, how to use gray rock, when to use it. Is it good to use it? We're also going to be talking about yellow rock, if you've heard of that, because gray rock is not very court friendly. It could be seen as you not being cooperative in the legal situation. So we're going to talk about what happens if you have to have contact with a narcissist, or like at least make arrangements. So what do you do about that situation? And we're also going to be talking about just our emotional investment. What kind of stance should we have emotionally in a narcissistically abusive relationship? And the hard part about this is, the advice I'm going to share is actually a relationship killer. And we'll talk about why it's a relationship killer and why we encourage people to leave. It's interesting. I just had an interview with Dr. Les Carter. He has a very large YouTube channel called Surviving Narcissism. And he was reminding me that he doesn't encourage people to go no contact. He says it really depends on situation to situation. And I do agree with him, but I also think no contact definitely has a role and plays a part with it. And here's another thing. I'm back to this gray rock, yellow rock. How does gray rock and yellow rock differ from stonewalling? Because narcissists love to stonewall us. And then when we shut down on them, they're going to accuse us of doing the same thing that they do to us, and that we're no better than them. They love to do that we're no better to them. So these are the things we're going to be talking about today. If you're new to this channel, new to me, new to my account, I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. And I love to talk about these issues. And so I come on here every Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. my time, Central Standard Time, and we talk about dysfunctional relationships, challenging relationships, how to keep your sanity when you feel like nothing you do is working, or how to manage relationships that just are taking you to the very end of yourself. So I'm so excited that you're here with me today. Be sure to, I notice on TikTok, the numbers are super low for me. Usually I've climbed way higher than this. So make sure on TikTok that you're liking the page. Do you guys know how to do that? You tap the screen. If you tap the screen, it likes the page, and share it. If you know somebody who's really struggling right now, who's in an abusive relationship, maybe they're having a lot of arguments, maybe they're losing a lot of arguments, and you think they benefit from this this topic today, make sure to share it. And Instagram, do the same for you. I'd love to have you share this where you think it's appropriate. I'm on all three platforms right now. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So I'm thrilled that you're here with me today and we can talk about these issues. So Aborzin, I can't say your name. I'm sorry. I'm just killing it. You're in a no contact situation, but you have kids, and it's nearly 2 months, and I don't care about her, but I want to see my kids, and I'm in no contact. What do I do? Yeah, that's a tough situation. How many of you guys have been in that situation where you've cut off ties, but inadvertently cutting off ties means you've cut off contact with the rest of your family? Maybe it's your children, or maybe it's your extended family. I know that's a common situation. Thank you so much for the request to go live with me. I don't accept requests to go live unless it's planned. So if you want to go live with me, and I'm here every Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, please make sure. Oh, is that why? Oh, thank you, Kate. Hey, it's Kate. Make sure that you yeah, I gotta change a setting here. There's a setting on that somebody just made me aware of, and I'm not for sure I can change it in midway. So I'm gonna there we go. I can change it. Okay. Thank you. Hey, it's Kate. You solved my problem. I kept thinking, why is TikTok so oddly quiet? Well, it's because I'd accidentally turned subscriber only content on, and I did not mean to do that. So, hey, it's Kate. You are, yeah, please go check, see if you can comment. You are amazing. You are amazing. So thank you so much, Joe Mack. I appreciate that. So yeah, it's back to the question that was asked on YouTube. It is a difficult situation when we cut off a connection with somebody because it's toxic. And yet that also means we've cut off all the other connections that we've had. That is just super painful. I don't think there's an easy solution, because contact means that you're going to have, in order to negotiate a visit, means you have to have contact of some kind. Oh, good. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. So the question then becomes, how can you manage that? And that's really the topic of today's live, is going to be, how do you have contact with somebody who's conflictual, antagonistic, that needs to make everything a really difficult issue? How do you do that? So let's get into talking about gray rock. What is the gray rock? Well, essentially what it is, and you're gonna think I'm describing stonewalling, and I'm not. We're gonna talk about the difference between stonewalling and gray rock. But the gray rock is essentially, you just don't get hooked. They're good at spotting our hot buttons. I mean, like, so good. And yes, I see that. And you don't actually have a name, the panda bear. I see your question about, yeah, it triggers him. So we're going to talk about what else to do, because gray rock, thank you for bringing that up. Gray rock doesn't work in every situation. For some people, it's like waving, it's a bull in a bull's fight, waving the flag. It's going to make it worse. So you have to know your partner or the person you're using this with, and you have to know how it's going to, will it lead to something worse, or is it going to actually lead to something better? You have to really know that. So thank you for pointing that out. So what it is, essentially, it's when you refuse to bite, and you just keep your answers super short and very specific to kind of like a non-committal or very specific. Like, if you bring up who's picking up the kids after school today, and you always have to make this a big deal. Why are we talking about this? If they go off on this tangent, a gray rock response would be, say, would you like to pick them up today? You ignore the effort to incite you, to pull you into an argument, and you bring it back to the topic. Or it could be when they attack you, like accuse you of something, you can say, okay, or I'm not for sure what to say to that, or never mind, or we'll talk about it later. You want to, whatever you do, you want to be super careful that you don't say something that's inflammatory, though, like the whatever. That's usually snarky. We usually are trying to be contemptuous when we say that. So I wouldn't urge you to use that unless you can say it in a really like non-sarcastic way, which I can't frankly do that. I'm always sarcastic that way when I say like whatever. So you don't want to do that. You want to say okay, or sure, or yes, or just something simple. You keep it to, yeah, fine, exactly, fine, or whatever. You keep it to something, not whatever. I don't know why that slipped out, but you keep it to something short. Now, the spin off, the yellow rock, is you do it politely, like, sure, that sounds fine, or yeah, no problem, we'll do that, or thanks for checking into it. Or maybe they're asking for communication. You'll say, I'll email you a letter. You, in other words, you keep it a little more polite. You don't like just cut off communication. You're not abrupt. You're a little more, you say a little more so it looks like you're cooperative. Because here's the problem. And Kate, I did see your question about your dad and saying goodbye. We'll get back to that. But the problem is you need to look like to the court systems if you're involved in a legal battle over custody with your children as if you're playing cooperatively. You want to look like you're a teammate who's trying to work something out. Like if they say, when's the next time I'm going to see the kids? You can say, the schedule's in the email. I can resend it to you. Would you like that? Well, I didn't get it. I'd be happy to resend the email to you. In other words, you keep on target. You don't get off target, but you appear polite, you appear cooperative, and you don't appear rude. The point is that you're not being rude or abrupt. Abrupt may be a good word. Now, like the user who has a panda face over on TikTok mentions, you really need to know their situation, because not all situations are going to work this way. Sometimes you're going to need to just emotionally detached, and actually all of the time it requires this in order to survive these types of arguments. And the problem is, once we get into these relationships and we fail to be the perfect image of what they thought it was, and it starts to get a little old, they start to devalue us. And so there's no winning. In fact, I just really heard a great quote that I just posted on TikTok, but I haven't posted in Instagram. I'm going to do it afterwards. It was by Dr. Les Carter. I got to interview him for an upcoming episode of Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. It's going to be the July 17th episode. So on Monday, July 17th, you're going to get to hear this amazing interview with Dr. Les Carter. And I just edited it, so I heard it again, and it's so good. He talks about the mind of the narcissist, and he said this: the narcissist doesn't have much of a core. They don't really have much of an identity. So they're relatively empty. Yes, they're fear-based, shame-based, but they can't soothe themselves. They don't have that ability to sort of reflect on themselves and soothe themselves and have an inner life like you and I have. I mean, I consider, in a way, I was thinking about this today, I'm my own best friend. I know how to talk to myself. I can talk myself off ledges. I can settle stuff that I feel really upset, mistakes. I know how to process mistakes. I have a relationship with myself. Narcissists don't have a relationship with themselves. They don't. So what they do to supply that is you. They use you, but they need you to become them. So they chisel and work away at you, emptying you of you so that you're more like them. But that's not perfect. That will never happen. You can't empty another person and make them yourself. That just doesn't work. In fact, here's an example. This is what the narcissist of my ex said to me. His ideal woman would sleep on the floor beside his bed and wait on his every need. He said that to me. Now, he said that early in the relationship, and I just remember looking at him thinking, well, you didn't describe a person. You described a robot. I mean, nobody's going to do that. But see, that he exposed exactly what he wanted. He wanted to empty another person and fill this person with himself. So basically what you're seeing them chisel on you. They're working you over. They're like, why don't you do that? You should do this. Or how come you do that? Or you never do things right. I mean, mine actually had the audacity. I was a mom, I raised 3 kids. I'd been married 31 years before I got widowed. You think I did some laundry in my life? I did a lot of laundry in my life. He actually needed to give me lessons on laundry. Tell me how to hang clothes. You don't think I'd hung a lot of clothes in those 31 years of marriage because I was in a traditional marriage with 3 boys? Yeah, I hung a lot of clothes. I think I know how to hang clothes in a closet. But see, he was attempting to say, Kerry, you don't exist. Only I exist. And I want you to let go of everything you think you know, because in my opinion, you don't know anything. And I'm going to imbue you with myself because he doesn't have a self. Isn't that wild? It's crazy. So when we are in these relationships with them, arguing with them, trying to change them is a worthless effort. That's why it doesn't work. You're asking them to meet you in the middle. Well, in their minds, there is no middle. The goal is you become like them. They have ultimate control. You become the robot. You do everything they want you to do. You show up, you're happy. You become like the Stepford wives in those movies. And then that's perfect. And even then they wouldn't be happy because it's impossible because they're not happy. You can't make somebody who's not happy happy. You have to find happiness in yourself. So that's why this is a losing battle. It's never going to work. Yeah, it's super, super crazy. And so back to the emotional detachment. So part of the way to win on all of this is actually to kill your feelings for the relationship. Yeah, you heard me right. For you to do these techniques successfully, you have to then become detached and cease to care what they think and feel. That's the only way to survive and hold on to your sense of self, which is why we tell you to leave. Because who wants to be in a relationship where there's no emotional connection? I don't. I want to care about my partner's opinion. I want to share what I think and feel about stuff safely and not have them trample all over it. And if I can't show up and be authentically myself, then what is this? This is nothing. I'm just being controlled by their agenda. I might as well not be here. So to successfully use gray rock and yellow rock, you have to emotionally detach. You have to say to yourself, I really don't care what they think. I'm really not. So if they think poorly of me, oh, well, who cares? If they think I'm the worst person in the world, my ex once told me I was the worst. I was the kind of driver, according to him, that caused accidents. Now, mind you, I've had one accident in my life, and that was when a sheriff officer struck me from behind at a stoplight. So it wasn't my driving, it was her driving. But I'm the kind of driver, he said, quote unquote, that causes accidents. So you can't win. You literally can't win. And that's why the question of how can you get him help? You can't get him help. You can't get him help. He has to realize he wants the help, that something's wrong, and he doesn't think there's anything wrong. He thinks that you're the problem because you bring the issues up. He doesn't see himself as the problem. And we're only using gender specific because in your situation, you used a gender. It doesn't necessarily apply to men. According to the latest research, approximately 5% of women in the world are narcissists and approximately 8% of men in the world are narcissists. So, it's not quite even, but I'll tell you the rates of the amount of, it's not 75% to 25% like we used to think. It's a little closer to 50-50 than we actually probably are comfortable with. So I want to circle back to Kim's questions. Kim's question earlier, for those who missed it, her father is ill, maybe dying, and she wants to have some closure with him. And she's wondering what she should do to get the closure. Kim, if you're still here, can you say more about that situation? Yeah. So, Panda Bear, when you say you're transitioning, are you meaning you're literally you're transitioning from a gender standpoint? Or you're transitioning to understand that your partner is very narcissistic? I would like to understand exactly what you mean. And Kim, if you could come back and say more about your situation with your father and needing closure, I would really love to talk about that with you. Yeah, Karen, they can't see that they are sabotaging their own life because that would then admit that they're flawed, and that fear of being vulnerable, of being seen, of being less than, means to them that they're cast out. They believe they would be ultimately rejected. So they have this. So they're their first victim. They create the false persona with themselves first, and then with everybody else. They can't look at the mirror and say, yes, I'm not perfect, because to do so would be to have to face, in their minds, annihilation, and they're not going to do that. So it's really actually quite an unconscious process that's happening. They're not actually cognizant that they are in a state of denial. Oh, the 75 to 25% is male to female percentage of narcissists. The actual research, latest research, it was a meta-analysis, said that 5% of women and 8%, almost 8% of men. So five to eight. So for every 5 women, there's 8 men. So it's not perfectly. Oh, okay. Thanks for clarifying that. You're transitioning from living together to living apart. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's what in other words, we used to think that 75% of all narcissists are male and only 25% are female, but the reality is actually it's not quite 50, but maybe it's 2/3 men, 1/3 women. But there's a lot more women than we acknowledge that there are. And that's an interesting discussion too. Why don't we see the women? I have a theory on it. I know, and I posted it recently that women hide. Here's the problem. We have pathologized women. We say women are too emotional, they can't lead, they have hormone cycles, they're inconsistent. I mean, they actually did a study in the 1970s. Dr. Warner was one of the researchers on it. I actually knew him. I went to his graduate school where he taught. And he did this research with several other clinicians, and they looked at the description of a healthy male, a description of a healthy female, and a description of a mental health patient. That was the 3 categories, and they had a whole list of adjectives, and it was the college students were the subjects. The subjects were to check all the adjectives that described a healthy male, a healthy female, and a neurotic or a mental health patient. Males came up with assertive and all the good adjectives, confident, assertive, all those nice things. The women, they described women though as the same essentially as the mental health patient. A healthy woman was the equivalent of a mental health patient. Okay, so there's our first problem. We don't know who women really are. We don't understand women. We think women are crazy, emotional, inconsistent, unreliable, too soft, not courageous, all these ugly things. So if we can't recognize healthiness in women, then how are we going to recognize narcissism in women? We're going to write it off as a woman being a woman, right? We can't see it because we have, in our mind's eye, characterized all women as flakes. Then we're going to end up missing when women really are actually dangerous. Now, it's interesting. Women tend to then show up when they become moms. And I had heard there's a new theory out there, and I want to tell you this is wrong. Please, this is wrong. The new theory is that childbirth brings out narcissism in women. It's not true. Not true. We see it. It's true. We observe it then, but that's not why we don't become narcissistic because we have kids. That's not what happens. So Queer Femme Care Bear, I see your questions. I'll pop back to that. I want to go over to Kate because I asked her to tell me more about her dad. Her stepdad's been great. He's got stage 4, maybe 2 years, but I want to say goodbye. My mom is NPD, MPD, BPD, and I don't want it to be awful if I reach out. Well, in other words, it's going to be awful if you reach out. And thank you so much for that gift. I appreciate that. Yeah, there is no way around that. I don't see any way around that, Kate. It's going to be awful if you reach out. This person is going to make it their drama instead of making it about what you need, unfortunately. I had a similar situation. Those of you who followed me for a while know that my sister passed away last year. And one of my family members also has personality difficulties too. And they tend to, funerals with them are miserable experiences. Miserable. I can't have the emotional space that I need to be able to process the way I need to do to even cry. I don't even feel permission to cry. So what I did was I actually broke ranks and didn't follow the family rule and made sure I had my alone time at the casket with my sister. So, that was my way of being able to tend to what I need. So it may take you getting really creative. It may take you getting really creative, Kate, to figure a way around how to connect with your stepdad so that you can have the words that you need without activating way too much drama, but it's not going to be perfect. Yeah, exactly. You're going to find the least bad outcome. I love that. That's a really great way to say it. Least bad outcome. Let's go back over to Queer Femme Care Bear's question, which her question is, what about the fact the majority of women are diagnosed as borderline personality disorders? I think that's fascinating. A lot of borderline personality disorder people tend to have a lot of narcissistic traits. So they're all part of the cluster B. So cluster B group is called the antagonistic group category in the DSM-5. That includes histrionic, which we don't talk a lot about. They say that the Johnny Depp's ex-wife, Amber Heard, they said had a lot of histrionic symptoms. Again, histrionic has its roots in feminism. Hysterical is its root word is from womb or from the uterus. So the whole thing is, I don't know, it's very noxious to me. But yes, borderlines do tend to be more likely to be feminine, but not necessarily. Interestingly enough, my dad had BPD symptoms. So my dad was a mixed personality disorder, and part of his presentation was borderline. So it certainly is there, certainly is a part of the dynamics. I think part of it is that, again, that femininity, the way that we define women, we see that well, let me stop for a second and define what borderline personality disorder core issue is. Their core issue is really close to the narcissist. The narcissist needs to be special and needs to be perfectly understood. That's sort of the developmental challenge. The borderline personality disorder's developmental challenge is fear of being abandoned, but fear of loss of self. This is twin fear. So if I let you get close to me, you're going to take over, and then I'm going to lose myself. That's one fear. But if you're not close to me, then you're too far away, and I'm going to lose you, and you're going to leave me, and that scares me. So they do this funny push-pull thing with you. Please come near me. Oh, no, you're too close. Get back away. Oh, you're too far away. Come close to me. They do this kind of funny. It's a dysregulation of relationships and a dysregulation of their emotions. So, but we for a long time thought that maybe trauma triggered it, that maybe having very adverse experiences triggered it, because they noticed that there was a high correlation between rape victims and those who had BPTs or borderline personality disorders. I can't say the initials today. So they kind of started making these assumptions that because of this sort of feminine crises, the things that happen more often to women, that maybe that's the connection. But I think the jury's out. I think that it's kind of a biosocial problem, meaning that it probably has some genetic precursors, but also there is definitely connection to what happens in our life and trauma and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we're more readily to see it in women than we're to see it in men. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen in men. And the whole group, that whole antagonistic group, which is this antisocial personality disorder, the narcissistic personality disorder, the histrionic personality disorder, and the borderline personality disorder, they all are really a lot like each other. And they kind of like almost fluidly move from one to another, depending on the circumstance. So you'll see a narcissist occasionally acting like a borderline, getting really afraid of being abandoned. But you'll also then see a borderline personality disorder act just like an antisocial personality disorder. When they feel that you have wounded them, they'll get enraged and cut you off and cut you off at the knees. Literally, they'll attack you and get really wild on you and do really quite violent things. I think the only one that, to me, that doesn't do a whole lot of moving into the other categories is the antisocial personality disorder. To me, they're, especially if they're genetically kind of predetermined that way, they seem to be who they are, kind of cold, ruthless, sort of robotic. So your ex did a full psych eval and was diagnosed with BPD, and she felt very little empathy and scared me. Yet what you're kind of describing, though, is not actually BPD. To me, that's a mixed presentation of an antisocial personality disorder with a borderline personality disorder. That's what mine. The guy that I was married to had BPD and he was antisocial personality disorder. He had a mix. And he scared me too. And he didn't have any empathy either. That ruthlessness, that callousness you're describing, that's more antisocial personality disorder. But they it's like they're in the same neighborhood, and they hang out with each other, and they sometimes even take on each other's characteristics. It's really bizarre. There's a whole lot that we don't know about this whole cluster. There's just a whole lot that we're still learning. I mean, we don't even know what its etiology is. So, etiology means what's the root cause of it. It's not trauma. It's not being sexually assaulted. It's probably lots of reasons. It's probably a bit of a genetic precursor. We're vulnerable to it, and then we have an environment that in some way triggers it for us. It's kind of scary, but they show neurological differences, so it's kind of a hardwired difference. Posh perfect. We're always wrong because we point out their wrongs and they can't accept it. Yet you're wrong because you're saying they're not perfect. And that's, in their point of view, that's unacceptable because they need to uphold the facade first to themselves. Remember, I said that they first lie to themselves, then to everybody else. Oh, I'm sorry, Jules, that you feel like you can't trust getting into another relationship. It's taken me a long time to get there. And I have to admit, for a long, long, long time, I felt very afraid of meeting possibly another toxic person. I've found, and I hate this saying because I don't believe it's true. The saying is, well, you first heal yourself, and then when you're totally healed, then you can go out and get into a relationship. Well, guys, that's not going to happen because it's what happens in a relationship that brings up our insecurities. We don't get to do that alone. Yes, you can get comfortable with getting alone and get to know yourself. That's really good. And you can certainly start to really work on your boundaries, and that's really good. But the stuff that goes wrong in relationships, you have to have a relationship to practice having a different kind of boundary. Does that make sense? You can't, how do you do that? You can't practice saying no when there's no one to say no to. So you have to be in a relationship to practice saying no. So it's where I am, and I am now putting my toe back into the dating pool again, just seeing what's going to happen. Maybe nothing. I don't know. Maybe I'll give up and quit too again. But I'm finding that I feel differently. I'm feeling not triggered, whereas before when I got online, I started feeling really, really scared. And I also know that this is another interesting thing. When a minute somebody shows toxicity, I'm done. I don't even care that I'm done. I'm just so done. They could be, Adonis, frankly. They could be like a walking god. And if they're toxic, I'm really not interested. And that place of confidence is sort of like, it's great. I'll tell you, it's really great. Yeah. Somebody got on, and I could tell he's a fuckboy, and it's just one too many conversations. It just was wrong. And I'm like, bye. I just don't want this. I don't need it. I just don't want it. So, yeah, Kirby, I see you requesting to be in the video, but I need you to ask me before the live, and so we know what the topic's going to be about. Yeah, it is. That's a great freedom, and I think that's where we all need to get. That's the goal for all of us, and regardless if we've been in a traumatic situation or not, we want to get to a place where we feel confident enough in ourselves to know that we can navigate most situations, that we can say no, that we can walk away, that we don't need to be chosen. That's where real freedom is, even in the middle of a relationship. Because here's the thing. I know why I thought this. And maybe anybody who's millennial or younger is not struggling with this, but I suspect if you're my age, I'm on the cusp of Gen X and older, so I'm almost a boomer. So I have a feeling that thank you so much, Maddie. I have a feeling that if a lot of us who was raised in the era that I was raised, and user, I see that question, born or made narcs. We'll get back to that. I see a lot of us who were raised when I was raised that divorce was wrong and bad, and you're a failure for divorcing, and that if you're really in a relationship, you should have that person's back no matter what. And that's super selfish of you to think of yourself first, and you should always put your needs first. So when I got into that relationship, oh, thank you so much, Queer Femme. I appreciate that. When I got into that relationship, leaving wasn't even in my lexicon. It wasn't anything that I really thought of myself in the extension of the relationship. I didn't see myself outside of the relationship. So now that I'm where I'm at today, I realize that it was grooming, and I grew up in a very religious environment. And I don't think the boys got that same message. I don't. In fact, I kind of envied them, envied the freedom they had, the autonomy that they got. But women very much in the era that I was, and my mom and my grandmother too. I mean, I saw them, they were defined. Here's my grandmother. Let me give you a picture of my grandmother. My grandmother was a very androgynous woman, very androgynous. Not much about her was feminine, actually. Um, she catered to men, and she hated women. It was fascinating. She loved me. I was her favorite. So she didn't hate all women because she loved me. But she kind of despised women's weakness, I think. But yet her whole life was shaped around the needs of even the men who worked I grew up on a farm. The men who worked in the field, she would cater to them and not cater to the women in her life. She had no place for women in her world except for her grandbabies, for her granddaughter. Isn't that strange? It was so bizarre. And I knew that. I could feel it off of her. I could feel this sort of this rage at women in general and rage at her own sex. And yet what she didn't realize was that she was doing the very thing that her sex does that she hates, which is placating the patriarch. It was such a paradox to me, So here I am. I get out of college and I get into my first relationship right out of college. I get married. My husband is centered in that relationship very, very much so. And then when he dies, what do? I move the next person into that, and I center the next person. And I have the awful, awful luck, I guess, and also probably because of my upbringing, of marrying a narcissist. I mean, my first husband wasn't, but my second was probably a dark triad personality, probably the worst type of personality you could meet is who I end up marrying. And I had to decenter him. I had to not make, and I mean, even now, now that I'm meeting people, I have to say, I'm not going to center this person. I'll center me and I'll center the relationship, but I'm not going to center this person. It's hard work. It's hard work to do this. So back to the question somebody asked that I want to circle back, and I said that I would, is narcissists made or are they created? Oh, actually, that's the same. Are they made? Yeah. Are they made by the nature, or are they created because they're born that way? I just looked at the research again. So I just looked at this big, huge analysis, and we don't know. But I can tell you it's not because of trauma. That we love to feel sorry for them. They love to have us feel sorry for them, but it's not because of trauma. Here's how I know. If you do it kind of this reverse way, it's really simple to see this. So I got to hear in person Dr. Vander Kolk, author of Body Keeps the Score. He comes every year to this conference in Washington, D.C. and speaks. It's fabulous. He is as gentle of a soul as you'd imagine him. If you've read the book Body Keeps the Score, he's a fabulous guy. And in this lecture on trauma and trauma treatment, but by the way, those that don't know me, I'm a psychologist. So I've been practicing psychology for 20 years, and then I closed my practice in 2015. But Dr. Vander Kolk said, of all of the Americans, and know that America probably has it pretty cushy when it comes to trauma, that 80% of Americans have experienced a class A type of trauma. 80%. I was shocked. I didn't know the rates were that high. And he said, but those who don't heal, only 40% don't heal. So the question then is, why does that 40% not heal? And he likens it back to lack of support. We don't do enough interventions for that group, and that's why they get stuck. Okay, but here's my point. If 80% of the United States, and the numbers are higher across the world, have been class A, worst type of trauma, then why are our rates of narcissism not 80%, right? Why is it running between 5 and 7%, depending on the gender? Shouldn't it be closer to 80, not 5 to 8%? The rate of the correlation is so bad there, there's no correlation. Now, I'm not saying that most narcissists haven't been traumatized, because most people have been traumatized. See, that's what we do. We make this error of, well, I've talked to them and they tell me this really, really bad history. And because they have this bad history, that's why they're the way they are. But if you talk to anybody, you're going to hear a bad history. So that's not why they're a narcissist. So what they have found, though, is, the question is it upbringing? Is it attachment style? Is it, Is it maybe there's some kind of like something goes wrong in the connection of the family? Is it environmental factors? Is it genetic? What they have found is that of all of the personality disorders, narcissism tends to correlate more strongly between families, that there's a strong genetic component. But again, it's not 100% because if it was, if you had, like in the twin studies, there would be 100% concordance between twins. That if one twin had it, then the other twin would have it, and that's not true. So the best that we can say is that it's a biosocial problem. I do think I agree with you, Care Bear, that being a golden child makes you at risk of being a narcissist, but I also know that's not 100% either. I've known golden children who grow up and they are not narcissists. So it isn't really that connection. And we do a lot of emphasis on maybe it's the mom, and it's not that simple. It really is not that simple. I think it's a combination of factors. And I do think there's a genetic predisposition. And then I think there's also a strong, environmental. Yeah, whenever they start to say, "Oh, it's because I had a bad life," here's the thing, watch out for this. Whenever narcissists start to tell us this sob story, what they're essentially doing is they're decentering us and the damage done to us, and they're recentering themselves. It's just strange. Flower Girl, I normally don't talk about religious things, but I will, just because you said that. That's a fascinating question. Flower Girl says maybe it's demonic possession. I do think there is something to that. I felt some kind of supernatural forces around my ex that was creepy, very creepy. And here's the other interesting thing is that Sandra L. Brown, who is the author of Women Who Love Psychopaths, we got to interview her recently. And she, now again, I don't think she's religious. I don't think Sandra, definitely, I've had interactions with her personally. So I know her, not well, but I know of her. And she said the group that really freaked her out, she used to work with antisocial personality disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, and male and female antisocial personality disorders. And she said the group that scared her the most was the women, the female antisocial personality disorders. She said that when they walked in the room, the hair on her body, on her legs and the arms and neck would rise. And she said she felt an other presence in the room with them. So, yeah, like I said, I don't usually talk about religious stuff, so I want to not spend much time there. But it just makes you wonder. And that eye turn black thing, someone just said, have you ever seen a predator eye turn black? You know what that is their eyes are dilating. What you're seeing is a dilation of, their pupils have dilated. So think about that. Usually that's because of excitement. Like if you're attracted to someone, your eyes will dilate a little bit. It's so you can sort of see better. So when they're getting an adrenaline rush, their eyes dilate. And that's really creepy. And it gives them this black look. I actually did this comparison of those of us who've been in a toxic relationship. We took our ex's eyes, just their eyes, and compared them, and it looked bad. It does really. Yeah, their pupils get bigger, which means, did I say it wrong? Maybe I said it wrong. So the pupil gets bigger, so the iris gets smaller, so there's less color, which means you're going to see more black of the pupil, which is kind of creepy looking. So Lundy Bancroft says therapy makes abusers worse and more abusive. Do I agree? I don't have enough experience to say if I know for sure. I can just talk about my own experience. If they're predatory and they're seeing everything from a win-lose standpoint, and you go to therapy with them, they're going to want to win the therapy too, and they're going to corrupt treatment and weaponize it, which then means that they'll get abusive using the tactics of therapy against you. I've certainly seen that. I know a lot of us have seen that kind of predatory use of couples therapy. So yeah, I it's not my first line of, I would not send a couple with narcissistic abuse to couples therapy. I would not do that. Yeah, you said you made your partner worse. Yeah, I'm not surprised. We're going to move off of the religious topic. So, Flower Girl, I'm thrilled that you're here. And that would be an interesting topic. Maybe what I should do is break the rules for myself one time. And because I just don't want all the crazies. That's why I don't do it. I just really, and I don't want to argue. I hate arguing about these points. And people get like they want to die on their religious point. If we can do it in like an intellectual way, kind of talk about these things, I don't mind. But it would be interesting to talk about the supernatural aspects of narcissistic abuse. That would be fascinating. I have a feeling a lot of us have some creepy stories. I actually had a supernatural encounter around that was freaky, that and I don't write about it. It's not in the book. I wrote a book called Love You More. It's not in my book. So here's the true story of what happened to me. So if you guys are interested, Love You More, the harrowing tale of lies, sex addiction, and double crossed. I don't tell it in this book. It just felt like, I don't know. It just didn't have a place. And if you guys are looking to heal, a really great book that I just put out just recently with Lisa Sunny is Surviving to Thriving. It's the 6 obstacles that are common to abuse survivors after an abusive situation. Mai describes a relationship with this psychologist as more of a close friendship, which makes me very uncomfortable, but I think he's embellishing. I have a feeling, Freckleface, that he's embellishing. Or there are some therapists with bad boundaries. So it's not out of possibility for this therapist to have befriended him, and that's bad treatment. That's unethical. It's a dual role. It's called a dual role. It's very inappropriate. But my suspicion is your toxic partner has a need to be seen as special. And so he's embellishing the relationship as something different than therapy. For God forbid that they actually, so but I'd listen, listen for sounds of boundary breaches, like meeting for coffee or sharing too much of their personal story. So he knows way too much about this person. You can listen for signs of boundary breaches. That's the way to hear if this relationship is moving into the inappropriate boundaries. So Luna, your therapist and you are friends, but are you still seeing your therapist for therapy? You sometimes, although it's not always legal in every state. Did you know that? It's not always kosher in every state, but if you're in the United States. But sometimes some therapeutic relationships can become social afterwards, but it should be not co-occurring. It shouldn't be co-occurring. Yeah, my narcissist took a test to see if he was psychopath, and he passed it, and he didn't fail the test. He passed it saying he wasn't, but I believe that he is. I believe he succeeded. Mine love to research crap and get really good at that. So what would be signs of a boundary crossing with a therapist? Is that what you're asking, Grindstone Healing? I want to make sure I know what you're questioning. Yeah, I don't trust him around any females. Yeah, I felt that way too with mine, because mine was a sex addict. He was a serial sexual predator. But I realized that it wasn't women's problem; it was his problem. So I wanted to blame the women, but it really was he was the dangerous one. It wasn't them. Yeah. So your question back to Grindstone Healing, is it related to therapy or related to just in general? Can you let me know which way it is? Yeah, they're Scrapalon wants to know, is that learned behavior, is that the eyes that we're talking about, that black eye thing? No, that's not learned, that's unconscious. The name of the book, the name of my book, which is told narratively, what it means is it's written like a true crime story. So if you like novels, it's written like a novel, but it's real. It's what actually happened to me. It's called Love You More. It actually happened. So everything in it, and I don't hold back. It's graphic. Please be aware it's graphic. I have on Amazon, I have 4.1 stars. So it's above almost it's more than 4 stars. Thank you. It's well written. It's hard to say that because people think, well, because you wrote a book, then you probably aren't a good writer, because there's a lot of people who think they can write and they can't write. We all know that. We've watched American Idol, right? How many people get on American Idol think they can sing and they can't sing? So I'm always hesitant. Like people are like, yeah, it's probably not a good book, but it is a well-written book. And I also paid a New York Times best-selling, New York Times winning author to be my editor, and it was edited twice. So Oh, is narcissism alert behavior? No, it's not completely alert behavior. It's biosocial. It's biosocial. The other book that just came out is Surviving to Thriving: The 6-Step Blueprint to Narcissistic Abuse, Healing, and Recovery. It's 6 steps. So it's a workbook. It's literally a workbook. That's not a page where you actually, you write in your answers to questions. We take you through 6 big topic areas like guilt. Are you feeling guilty? Are you feeling a lot of fear? We actually take you through 6 big areas: guilt, fear, hopeful wish, mourning, loss, and have you work through it like a workbook. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to need to wrap it up in about 5 more minutes. This has been a lot of fun. I certainly appreciate this. Oh, you feel called to share this live. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Can I explain what I mean by biosocial? Because that seems to be a question we keep circling back. And I know Scrap Along Mail would love me to talk some more about this. What we mean by this is that, as I said, that it's not completely created. It's not like they had a bad experience and it caused the narcissism. But it also, there's a strong genetic component because it co-occurs between twins. So it's not 100% between twins, but there is a large, so if one twin has it, raised apart, guys, not raised together, because you're going to say, well, they came from the same family, that's why they're alike. No. Twins raised apart, there is a high rate of concurrence between twins and having narcissism. So that means there's a genetic component, not 100%, because if it was, then it would be both twins would have it always. If one twin had it, the other does, and they don't. So it is, what's the rate of concurrence? In one study, it was 70% between twins. It's a lot. That's really high. That's higher than most of the other personality disorders. It's really genetic, but it's not 100% genetic. So there's a I don't know what the lowest range of concurrence is. It didn't give it that. It just ranked order all the personality disorders and gave the rate of concurrence between twins. So I don't know what that range is. But we do know that it's not trauma based, because if you do the backwards, yes, they're identical, raised apart. Identical twins raised apart. If you do the backward analysis of trauma, if 80% of the United States has been traumatized, why are not rates of narcissism close to 80%? It should be, right? It's not. And the rate of difference is so high that it shows you there's actually no correlation. So it's some occurrence between environment and nature, and we don't really understand what exactly it is. Do I think there's a difference between cluster B disorders is partially nominal, or do I think there's a lot of overlap? I think there's a lot of overlap. I think if you think of them at like a Venn diagram, all 4 of them, you're going to have huge areas of the circles overlapping. I do think that. And that's why. And I also think their structure is not that different from each other. They just have a little bit of differences in the way that they manage emotions and because empathy is an issue across all of them. Self-reflection is a problem across all of them. Management of emotions problem. Impulse control is a problem across all of them. So there's a lot of like overlapping similarities, but then with some key critical differences between them. I asked Sandra Brown personally, I asked her to her face, what percent of the world she thought was predatory. She said 20%. And then I asked another psychologist who actually was a chair. He was a disciplinary chair of a state in the United States. So he was he was a part of disciplining all the psychologists in that one state. He was my supervisor. And I asked him, what percentage of the world is healthy? He said 7%. Yeah, not good. It's not good. And then are we surprised why we run into all these problems over and over and over and over? Yeah. Thank you so much for the gift, Jackie. I appreciate it. Yeah, only 7%. Isn't that amazing? So I'm going to wrap it up today with telling you something I'm super excited about. I've decided to do something with the subscription memberships on these platforms. So on all of these platforms, the membership is now open. And what I'm going to be doing is dropping 3 videos a week that are longer, more detailed content about stuff like this. The first 3 go live on July 2nd. So I'll drop 3 then, and every week I'll drop 3. And I already created a list. In fact, I don't think it's now available. It was available on Story, but I can, put it back up. And it is posted on Instagram, and it's been posted on YouTube. And I've already created the 3. I'm now starting to edit them. So if you like this type of in-depth stuff and you find it interesting, consider becoming a subscriber for this exclusive content. I will not be publishing this anywhere except for members. It'll be members only, 3 times a week, exclusive content about narcissism, psychology of narcissism, psychology of cluster B, how victims are preyed upon, how to protect ourselves better, what to look for with psychopathic abuse. How do you subscribe? It should be right in the Instagram. So I know that it's available in all these platforms, and I will post Queer Femme Care Bear. I'll post a story up again. Actually, it's a story right now, and I don't know if the link is there or not, but I'll make sure I create one. This has been amazing, guys. In fact, I'm terrible at marketing myself. I mean, I have stuff I should be telling you about, like my online course and about the membership club that I've got, and I'm just suck at it. But I love to educate. So the subscription will be my way of educating it more about this. So I appreciate this so much. Thanks for hanging out with me. I actually had my largest audience on Instagram today. We got up to 32. I usually am very small over there. So I love that. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I'm here Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Come back. Let's hang out again next week with me. I always announce the topic. I announce the topic in YouTube. So if you want to know a day ahead what the topic's going to be, jump over to YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure to subscribe and follow me, and then you'll know what the topic is. And you notice that I start there, but we move off into your questions, because that's the funnest part, is to see what you guys. Hey, it's so great hanging out with you too. And right now I'm going to jump over to my club and hang out with my club members. Check out that. If you're interested in healing with a group and hanging out with a psychologist, be sure to check out Toxic Free Relationship Club. You guys rock. You know how much I love you all. You take care. Bye-bye.